Hello ladies and gentlemen, Tevaron here and welcome back to the Aether Revolt set review. This time we will be going over the green cards of Aether Revolt. Just as a reminder, these are my opinions and raw card evaluations, having never actually played with the cards before. And I am bound to get some of them wrong. Maybe a lot of them wrong, just depending. If you would like to check out the previous reviews, just click the link in the description or the small pop-up in the upper right corner of the video, and it will take you to a handy-dandy playlist. And here we go. Aether Stream Leopard. 2 and a green for a 2/3 cat with trample. When Aether Stream Leopard enters the battlefield, you get an energy counter. Whenever Aether Stream Leopard attacks, you may pay an energy. If you do, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. This seems like a decent card that can go in red-green or green-X energy. Reasonably aggressive. It's a shame you can only pump it once each attack with its own ability, but the trample is especially nice, particularly with other pump spells involved. Aether Wind Basker. 4 and 3 green for a 7/7 lizard with trample. Whenever Aether Wind Basker enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy counter for each creature you control. Pay an energy and Aether Wind Basker gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I think that there are better ways to generate energy than this guy, and that's before we even consider that an aggressive deck doesn't want to be paying 7 mana for anything. The trample is again a nice touch. I'm just not convinced that this guy is better in mid-range or control than the 7 drops that green already has in Plated Crusher and Gaia's Revenge. Aether Herder. 3 and a green for a 3/3 elf artificer druid. So a lot of hats that elf is wearing there. When Aether Herder enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. Whenever Aether Herder attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So this is the green part of the servo cycle. Like the rest, pretty mediocre. Just not impressed. The leopard and the other creatures we already had in Kaladesh are better for the energy decks than this is. Aid from the Cowl. 3 and 2 green, enchantment. Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, you may put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom of your library. So, another card that is interesting, but just doesn't hit the mark, I think. A 5 mana investment, probably taking your whole turn to cast it. Then you have to trigger Revolt, and it doesn't happen until your end step, and only happens once, no matter how many times you triggered Revolt that turn. And then, you still have to hit a permanent, and probably also hope that it's not just a land. Too much investment, and too big a gamble for potentially 0 payoff. Druid of the Cowl. 1 and a green for a 1/3 elf druid. Tap, add a green to your mana pool. A mana dork. At common. You know what? That's really sweet, and something that green was really lacking, especially as they didn't see fit to give us Servant of the Conduit. Super happy to see this girl in the set. A solid card. Greenbelt Rampageer. 1 green for a 3/4 elephant. Yes, you heard that correctly, a 3/4 elephant for 1 green. When Greenbelt Rampageer enters the battlefield, pay 2 energy counters. If you can't, return Greenbelt Rampageer to its owner's hand, and you get an energy counter. Okay, first we need to understand what this guy isn't. It's never going to be a 3/4 on turn 1. And since Duels doesn't have a tune with Aether, it's not a turn 2 play either. Still, 1 mana for a 3/4 on turn 3, leaving you mana to play something else, still seems pretty great. And there is the fact that he can generate you some energy if you happen to be a little short. But it is worth noting that if you have the 2 energy to pay for him, then you have to pay it, as that is not a May trigger. You can't use him to just generate infinite energy equal to the number of mana that you have. Greenville Liberator. 1 and a green for a 2/3 elf warrior. Revolt. Greenville Liberator enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. So this seems like a pretty strong card. You do need to trigger Revolt for it to be good enough, as without it, it's pretty subpar. I think there are going to be a lot of things getting sacrificed in Magic Duels over the next few months. Highspire Infusion. 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. You get 2 energy counters. So another good card for an aggressive energy deck. Though with so many pump spells, we have to be very selective in the ones we choose to play. Too many pump spells and not enough creatures will leave you spell flooded, and it doesn't give trample, which is very relevant. Still, a welcome addition to the card pool. Lifecraft Cavalry. 4 and a green for a 4/4 elf warrior with trample, Revolt. Lifecraft Cavalry enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. Well, Verdurous Gearhulk is a lot better 5-drop than this, and that isn't seeing much play at all right now. I don't think that bodes very well for the playability of the cavalry. Lifecrafter's Gift. 3 and a green, instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, this card seems just made to be put in a +1 counter deck. At instant speed, no less. Very cool addition. That could also see play in, say, a green-white deck with Gideon, Nissa, and Oath of Ajani, which we will talk about in greater detail during the multicolored section. Monstrous Onslaught. 3 and 2 green for a sorcery. Monstrous Onslaught deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control as you cast Monstrous Onslaught. I don't want to call this unplayable and be proven very wrong, but for now I think I'll just stick with Nature's Way or Rabid Bite. Narnum Renegade. 1 green for a 1/2 elf warrior with Death Touch. Revolt. Narnum Renegade enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. I'm not sure how good this card actually is. It's pretty much impossible to trigger Revolt on turn 1, and to reliably trigger Revolt in green, you need to play Vessel of Nascency, which means that Gnarlwood Dryad is likely just better. You could run both, I guess. Pima Aether Seer. 3 and a green for a 3/2 elf druid. When Pima Aether Seer enters the battlefield, you get an amount of energy counters equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Pay 3 energy. Target creature blocks this turn if able. So it generates enough energy to use its ability, even if it's the only creature you have. Well, I mean, unless it dies with the trigger on the stack. The question is, does an energy deck want this effect? Probably not. If it forced all enemy creatures to block it, like Elvish Bard, then maybe we'd have something. As is, I don't like it. Ridgescale Tusker. 3 and 2 green for a 5/5 beast. When Ridgescale Tusker enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. I think this is an okay card, potentially fitting the top end of a counters deck, or even just alongside Oath of Ajani, etc. in green-white. Not super exciting, but I definitely think it has potential. Rishkar's Expertise. 4 and 2 green sorcery. Draw cards equal to the greatest power amongst creatures you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Sadly, we don't get Rishkar himself, but just like the other Expertise spells, this one is quite strong, especially along Planeswalker's Gideon or Nissa Vital Force that can make sure you always have a 5/5 on the field when you cast it. Also worth noting, you get to draw your cards before you choose what card to cast for free with it. Very sweet. Scrounging Bandar. 1 and a green for a 0/0 cat monkey. Scrounging Bandar enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Scrounging Bandar onto another target creature. Well, best case scenario with the cat monkey is you move the counters onto your electrostatic pummeler. And even that's not very good. I should probably say something nice about it though, so I don't hurt its feelings. It's a cute little guy. That counts for something, doesn't it? Silkweaver Elite. 2 and a green for a 2/2 elf archer with reach. Revolt. When Silkweaver Elite enters the battlefield, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, draw a card. Well, we can only run 2 tireless trackers since they are rare. This card could see play alongside those in some number as a bigger version of Elvish Visionaries with reach. Maybe. Paying 2 mana to crack a clue and then 3 to cast the Elite does seem kind of slow. Maybe too slow. Unbridled Growth. 1 green enchantment. Enchant land. Enchanted land has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, sacrifice Unbridled Growth, draw a card. So what does this card do? Well, it triggers Revolt, fuels Delirium, and is maybe the best mana fixer available in Duels. And that's a lot of good stuff at the cost of 1 little mana. This is probably an auto-include in any Revolt or Delirium deck running green. And that is the end of the green cards coming to Magic Duels in Aether Revolt. Let's rank our top 3, shall we? Coming in at number 3, Unbridled Growth. Number 2, Druid of the Cowl. And at number 1, Rishkar's Expertise. So, what were your favorites in green? What would you have liked to have gotten that we didn't get? Personally, I would have loved to see Rishkar Pima Renegade in Duels. Guess we can't get everything we want though. Next time, we'll look at the colorless cards. I hope you'll join me for that, cause there are a lot of them. But until then, friends, be excellent to each other.